Hey Fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis and you're watching Fight News Now Extra. Don't go anywhere, we have the hottest headlines from the MMA world coming right up, and our MMA panel will join us to tell us what it all means. Here we go. Strikeforce's last reigning middleweight champion, Luke Rockhold, is calling out the UFC's Konstantinos Philippou, who is on a 5-fight winning streak, and most recently TKO'd Tim Boetsch at UFC 155. Rockhold has also put together 5 wins and is looking to make his UFC debut against the Serra-Longo fighter on the Fox 7 card. This past Tuesday morning, Dana White went under the knife and had his left ear removed and then reattached in a procedure to reduce spontaneous attacks of Meniere's disease. He's been suffering from the disease, which causes vertigo and severe pain, for more than a year now. The procedure was successful, but White will not be flying down to Brazil this weekend for UFC on FX7. And light heavyweight champion Jon Jones is sick and tired of hearing Strikeforce's heavyweight tournament winner Daniel Cormier talk about dropping down to 205. Jones said he'll fight Cormier and just wants him to shut up and drop the weight. But first, Jones is scheduled to defend his belt against Chael Sonnen at UFC 159, and Cormier is throwing down with Frank Mir at UFC on Fox 7. Those are the top headlines coming out of the MMA world. Let's hear from our panel, John Pollock, John Ramsey, and Robin Black. You guys, another Strikeforce heavyweight, Josh Barnett. He has not been picked up by the UFC. Why is that?
Well, it's interesting. Robin Black doing some investigative work here. The War Master says he serves no master except for the UFC.com webmaster. Apparently.
Yeah, apparently this morning, Josh Barnett's profile popped up on the UFC.com. So maybe, yeah, maybe he serves the mighty Green Master.
That makes the most sense. I mean, Josh Barnett is clearly a perfect fit for the UFC. The UFC knows that they can use a guy like Josh Barnett the same way that they used Chael Sonnen. The difference is, I think Josh Barnett is a little more competitive with the heavyweights than Chael Sonnen is, unfortunately, with the middleweights. I mean, he brings it, but I think Josh Barnett could be a top 5 heavyweight if he eventually fights in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree. And the big money right now, if you got to lay out who's he going to fight, Czech Congo. For sure. Doesn't everybody fight Czech Congo to see if they can really breach the top of the heavyweight division? That's probably his first.
I like Verdun or Frank Mir. I think those would be great fights, Barnett. And I think everybody will do their job trying to sell it as well.
What about the other day, me and Robin were discussing this scenario of Viacom and Bellator going after Josh Barnett and having that crossover that you can really accentuate using him in TNA and Bellator. This guy is ready. He can already wrestle professionally, unlike King Mo, who's basically starting from scratch. To me, Barnett would be a big asset, and he comes into that heavyweight division and at least puts some name value into that division.
I agree. I mean, Barnett is the perfect example because I think when you match him up with the other heavyweights in Bellator, he is clearly at the top of the heap. But when you talk about the crossover between wrestling and MMA, the problem is what happens if you lose in MMA? You lose 2 fights, like King Mo goes in and say he loses his next 2 fights. Where's the value in that? You're not getting a guy that's winning in mixed martial arts, so how can you sell him in the world of pro wrestling? I know they can be 2 different worlds, but in order for these guys to be successful on both platforms, they have to be successful. And for mixed martial arts, this is their bread and butter, they have to be successful at that before they can be successful in wrestling.
Now, some exclusive news coming from this desk. I spoke to Tarek Saffiedine this morning, the final Strikeforce welterweight champion, and he told me that despite this list that has come out, he has not signed with the UFC. He has not signed anything yet. His manager is in talks with them, and arguably, I think we can assume he will make his way to the UFC. But this list, I don't know if we can take it as concrete that these guys have actually put pen to paper, and it's not a simple case of just absorbing these Strikeforce deals.
Yeah, I mean, I have a list of 70 incredibly beautiful women that I'm dating all of them. But actually, I'm not dating any of them, and my wife would kill me if I did. But it's the same thing. It's like the UFC, because they are the place that everybody wants to go, they can say, oh yeah, we got all these guys. All they're doing is talking to these guys. Chances are Tarek Saffiedine, where's he going to go? You know, where is Tarek Saffiedine going to go? He wants to be in the UFC. He will sign that deal. But I get your point. These aren't all signed yet.
So anyway, full interview with Tarek Saffiedine coming Friday at FightNetwork.com. And now you can hold up hope that Billy Evangelista, hopefully, he will make the crossover to the UFC. First up, though, Saturday night, FX. It's their the UFC's first time in Sao Paulo, Brazil since October of 1998. Ticket sales actually have not been that hot for this event. Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort. That seems to be the most intriguing fight on this card, and a main card that the name power doesn't exactly jump off the page.
Fair enough. I think it's because the main event is just such a superstar matchup. You have really two of the top 5 middleweights in the world going at it. And when you look at the undercard, I think the most intriguing fight, I think, is the heavyweight fight between Gonzaga and Ben Rothwell. I think that's an interesting fight, as well as the fight between Diego Nunes and Nick Lentz. I think that's interesting, but just not for the casual fan. They really haven't, there's not a lot of big names on this card outside of Bisping and Belfort. But I think a lot of the fights are going to be competitive. You also have to look at, like I mentioned, that fight between Gonzaga and Ben Rothwell, as well as CB Dalloway. So I think it's guys trying to sort themselves out, as well as the Brazilian contingent, try to get some experience to some of these guys coming off the reality show.
Well, this time last year, we were complaining that there was not enough quality fighters to make good cards at all. Guys were dropping out with injuries. There was a lot of problems. Whereas right now, we're so glut with good fights over the last few cards, and we're looking at cards coming up that are good, that this one stands out maybe as not being quite as good. That's a bit of it being a victim of so many great cards.
Especially when you follow it the following week with the Fox 6 card, which is really loaded.
Yeah, I think two fighters that really fall under the radar, but I think I'm looking forward to. You mentioned Nick Lentz, Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's coming out of AKA. We've seen him already with a number of big performances. He will be taking on Thiago Tavares in lightweight action, Sarah. I'm personally looking forward to that, how the Russian does in his next outing.
Me too. All right, go Russia.
Love Russia.
Thanks, guys. And we have some heavyweight action going down this weekend on Fight Network. Don't miss the battle for the Canadian heavyweight title between Nevin Pakic and Shane Andreessen. The card gets underway at 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. And coming up next on Fight News Now Extra, we're previewing another boxing match. Corey Erdman talks featherweights.